In our previous lesson, we talked about half-life. We gave the definition, and we also had one sample question, which involved the calculation of half-life. Now let's look at the second one. Now the second one here reads 9.6 grams of a radioactive element was reduced to 0.15 grams after 36 weeks. Find its half-life. So the original mass is given as 9.6 and the mass which is left is 0.15. So this mass kept on reducing from this value to this. 9.6 grams of a radioactive element was reduced to 0.15 grams. So from 9.6 grams to 0.15 grams. After how long? So it took this radioactive element 36 weeks for its mass to reduce from 9.6 grams up to 0.15 grams. And the examiner here wants you to calculate the half-life. He has given you 3 marks, assuming you get it right. So for us, as part of our solution, we are going to begin from 9.6 grams. We keep dividing by 2 until we reach 0.15 grams. Remember, they said from 9.6 grams up to 0.15 grams. So we should end here because the question says up to here. So what do? We simply get 9.6 grams, we divide it by 2. Remember, we are talking about half-life. So half-life, if we remind ourselves, is the time taken by a radioactive element or sample to reduce to half of its original mass. So we begin with the 9.6 grams. We get a half of this. A half of this means you divide this by 2. So when you get 9.6 grams divided by 2, you get 4.8 grams. We divide this one also by 2, we get 2.4 grams. Divide by 2, 1.2 grams rather. Divide by 2, now you come to 0.6 grams. Divide by 2, you get 0.3 grams. Divide by 2, you end up with 0.15 grams. Now when we reach here, we don't need to divide by 2 again. Why? Because the question said we should end here from 9.6 grams up to 0.15 grams. Now remember, this one is a half of this. This one is also half of this. This one is a half of that. This one is a half of this. This one is half of that. This one is half of. So what does that mean? The time taken for the mass to reduce from 9.6 grams to 4.8 grams is half-life. So we can give any letter to represent half-life. In this case, for me, I've chosen N. For you could choose any other, X, Y, A, B, C, and so on. As long as you tell us that that letter you have picked on represents, in this case, half-life. So this is a half-life. This is also half-life. This is half-life. This is half-life. This is half-life. This is half-life. From 9.6 grams up to 0.15 grams. And the question says, for this mass to reduce from 9.6 grams up to, you see where the arrow ends? 0.15 grams. It took 36 weeks. So what does that mean? If you add the time from here up to here, plus this time, 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 should give you a total of 36 weeks. And when you add, how many are they? These are all n's. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there are 6n. So we shall add them. N plus n plus n plus n plus n plus n 6 times, which is just the same as saying 6n, is equivalent to 36 weeks. So all this, they total to 6n. So 6n is giving us a total of 36 weeks. What about 1n? So you divide both sides by 6 because you want to remain with the n alone. So 6 by 6, you get 1. 1 times n remains n. So 36 divided by 6, you get what? 6. Remember, this time was in weeks, 36 weeks. So the answer you have calculated, the n, should also be in weeks. And this n is representing what? Half-life. So for that reason, we shall say the half-life n is 6 weeks. If we just say the n is 6 weeks, it would also be good. But it's better to define what n is. In this case, n represents what? Half-life. Half-life n, if you picked on x, you would also say the half-life x equals to 6 weeks. Don't forget to write the units. If this one was in weeks, you also put here weeks. If it is in days, also days. If it is years, like that. Remember, half-life is time. And there are so many units of time, seconds, minutes, and so on. So this is how you handle it. So the examiner said, if you passed this very well, he or she would give you 3 marks. How do you think these marks would be awarded? So out of the 3 marks, this long stretch here would earn yourself what? Would earn you 1 mark. Another area is here when you are adding the n's being equal to 36 weeks. That could be the second one. And then the last mark would be divided by 2. A half for the correct answer, which is 6, and then a half for the unit, which is what? Weeks. And you get all your 3 marks. Let's look at another question related to half-life. This one says the half-life of a radioisotope is 10 days. So this time they have given you half-life. But here, in this question, they wanted you to calculate half-life. They gave you the total time, 36 weeks, and they wanted you to calculate what? Half-life. But I think in this one, they decided to give you half-life, but they want the total time. Let's see how we can handle this. It says, let's read again, that the half-life of a radioisotope is 10 days. So the half-life is already known. The n is already known. Calculate. What are we supposed to calculate now? Calculate the mass left. Okay, they want the mass left after 40 days. If the original mass was 16 grams, you see? So they have given us original mass. They want the mass which is left, you see? So what do we do as a part of the solution? We shall say, what was original mass? 16 grams. So we use the same trick. Keep dividing by 2. Divide this by 2, you get 8 grams. And the time taken here is half-life, which is n. But this time we are not going to say n. Why? Because the half-life is given. When it is given, there is no need of saying n. When you say n, it means you don't know it. Like the previous question, we didn't know n, but here we know it. So we just put the 10 days. Okay? We divide this also by 2, you get 4 grams. And because this 4 is a half of this, the time taken is also half-life, another 10 days. 10 plus 10, you get what? 20 days. But the question says after 40 days. So we keep dividing by 2 until we reach 40 days. So these are 20 days. So we divide this by 2, we get 2 grams. And this one is also 10 days, which is half-life. So when you add 10 plus 10, this is 10 plus 10 plus 10, those are 30 days. We have not yet made 40 days, which the question wanted. So we go ahead and divide this by 2. Again, you get 1 gram. And the time taken is also half-life, which is 10. So when you add 10 plus 10 plus 10, you get the 40 days. So because the question was talking about after 40 days, there is no need of you again dividing this one by 2. Because if you divide by 2, you will now go to 50 days. And therefore, you will go against the question. You will be now calculating what the question does not want. So we end here. And after that, we can now answer the examiner. Because he said the half-life was 10 days. Calculate the mass left after 40 days. So if you look at this, what is the mass left? It started with 16 grams. It ended with 1 gram after 40 days. So we simply say the mass which is left after 40 days is going to be 1 gram. You see? When you add all this time, 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10, you get 40 grams. And what is the mass here? The mass left is 1 gram. So you simply say the mass left is 1 gram. 2 marks are supposed to be awarded here. 1 may go for this long stretch, then the remaining 1 can be divided by 2. 1 for the half for the correct answer, which is 1, then another half for the unit, which is grams. It is always very important for you when you are calculating, put the units if they must be there. Part of the question says again, find the mass that decayed. You see, the mass that decayed. Let's go back to the, we started with the 16 grams, we ended with what? 1 gram. So how much is lost? If you had 1,000 shillings and now at the end of the day you remain with 300 shillings, how much has been used or lost? You subtract. So for us to get the mass which has decayed, decayed here means the one which is now lost in the, during the process of what? Decaying. So the mass decayed simply means you get original mass, which is 16 grams, minus the mass which is left, which is 1 gram. 16 minus 1, you get what? 15 grams. So if there are 2 marks here, I have for the formula of the formula here now is this part where you say mass decayed is equal to original mass minus the mass left. Then another half for substituting original mass as 16 minus 1 grams. Then a half for the correct answer after subtracting 16 minus 1, you get 15. Then the remaining half is for the unit. And you get your 2 marks. Okay? Now, let's move on to question number 4. And question number 4 says 16 grams of a radioactive sample decays to 2 grams. You see? So they have given you the original mass and the mass which is left from 16 grams to 2 grams. So when you are drawing when you are drawing this, you make sure you start from 16, you end with 2. Don't go beyond 2. Then the question continues. If the half-life is 1,620 years, so the half-life is given, which we represented as n, find the time taken. 2 marks. Find the time taken. So we start with the 16 grams. We keep dividing by 2 until we reach 2 grams. 16 divided by 2, you get 8 grams. 8 divided by 2, you get 4 grams. You get 4 grams. Then 4 grams you divide by 2, you end up with what? 2 grams. So you keep dividing 16 by 2, you get 8. 8 by 2, you get 4. 4 by 2, you get what? 2. So you don't need to go beyond 2 grams. Why? Because the question said start from 16 grams and end on 2 grams. Let's go back to the question. 16 grams of a radioactive sample decays to 2 grams. You see? So you don't need to go beyond what? 2 grams. Okay? But we are given the half-life. So what do you do? Instead of writing here n, we only write here n when the half-life is not known. But if it is known, you write the figure. Our half-life is given 1,620. So you write it here, 1,620 years. You write it here, you write it here, you write it there. How many half-lives are those? There are 3 of them. So if somebody wants you to find the time taken, what do? This is the time. But this is the time taken for the mass to reduce from this to that. And then this is also the time taken for it to reduce from this to that. Then this is also the time taken to reduce from this to that. So what do you do? To get the total time, what do? You add them. So for us, we shall say the time taken is equal to this time plus this time plus this time. All of them are in years, which is the same as getting 1,620. Then you multiply by 3. And you end up with the answer 4,860 years. And that one becomes the answer. How many marks were awarded? There were 2 marks. So a half, not even a half, you can give you a full mark. Okay. Then the remaining 1 mark you divide by 2. 1 for the correct answer, which is 4,860. Actually a half for the correct answer, then remaining half is for the unit, which is what? Years. Why years? Because the question was talking about years. So master the question properly. If the time is in minutes, use minutes. Don't change the meaning. So this is how we handle this type of question, and you get all your marks.